On my birthday, James stood me up again because of his childhood sweetheart. I blew out the candles without any emotional ripple in my heart and then gradually distanced myself from his world. Later, with red eyes, he asked me who the man beside me was. I just thought it was ridiculous. What? Is being childhood sweethearts your exclusive privilege? James sent me a message saying that he was having a dinner party with his friends and would be home later, and I didn't mean to wait for him. I replied calmly that I understood. Friends. I suddenly remembered something and opened Isabella's Weibo. Sure enough, she had updated her Weibo with a photo of a dinner party in a hotel. In the photo, she was surrounded by others like the moon among the stars. With delicate makeup, she held her face with one hand and smiled brightly at the camera. The man holding a wine glass and facing the camera on her left was none other than James. Isabella's caption read, "When I look back, you're still there and I'm very happy." I started the photo for a while and then turned off the screen. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was almost 10 o'clock. I lit the candles, made a wish, and blew them out calmly. The cream on the cake was a bit melted, but it was delicious. I cut a piece of a cake and ate it. The food on the table had been heated in the microwave several times and then cooled down completely, having lost its original flavor. I didn't want to touch it at all, so I threw it all into the garbage bag. After taking a shower, I lay down. I was in a drowsy sleep when there was a sound of the door opening. James came in drunk. The sound of the door slamming shut was a bit loud, and it woke me up all of a sudden. I rubbed my brows and got up and left the bedroom. James was sitting on the sofa with his eyes half closed. It seemed that he had drunk a lot tonight. Hearing Wes's footsteps, he squinted at me and said with a smile, "Sophia, did I wake you up? I'll pay attention next time." "Yeah," I said. "I have to go to work tomorrow. I'm going to bed now, and you should too." After that, I picked up my eye mask and bleeded earphones and went back to the bedroom and closed the door. After a while, the sound of the shower came from the bathroom. When the sound stopped, I heard the footsteps outside getting louder and louder as they approached the bedroom. After stopping at the bedroom door, James seemed to hesitate for a moment and then left. I let out a sigh of relief, but at the same time, I felt a bit sad. From beginning to end, he didn't realize that today was my birthday. But I was only disappointed for a short while. A strong sense of sleepiness hit me, and I gradually fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, James was still asleep. He had slept in the guest room last night. The clothes he had changed last night were still on the floor of the bathroom. I ignored them. I finished washing up and closed the door softly. I didn't make breakfast today, so I left home 20 minutes earlier than usual. These 20 minutes allowed me to be calm and unhurried. James is rather picky about food, so I usually go out of my way to make different kinds of breakfast for him. James always ate quietly and occasionally said that I had made some progress in a certain dish and that it tasted good. Therefore, I was even more eager to do it. But today I suddenly felt tired of it. James is an adult with hands and feet. If he wants to eat, he can surely make something for himself. He won't starve to death. When I got to the company, I started my busy day. In the middle of the day, James sent me several messages asking me when I woke up and why I didn't wake him up. I was busy with work and didn't reply. At 11 o'clock, he called me. I answered the phone. On the other end of the phone, his voice was calm. "Sophia, are you very busy this morning? Why didn't you reply to my messages?" I looked at the piled-up work in front of me and said, "Yeah, I'm a bit busy." "No matter how busy you are, you should have lunch on time, or your stomach will hurt again." After a few seconds of silence, he said softly, "Sophia, I'm sorry. I forgot yesterday was your birthday. Are you angry?" Oh, it seemed that he had seen the cake in the refrigerator. I stopped turning the pages of the documents and sneered, "No. It's not easy for your friends to get together, and it's only right that you go out and accompany them." I said it sincerely, and it seemed that the person on the other and let out a sigh of relief and spoke. "Although we missed your birthday, the birthday gift should be made up for. When we have some free time someday, let's go shopping in the mall. See what clothes or bags you like, and we can pick one. No, it's not easy for us to earn money, and we still need to save money to buy a house. Oh, all right then. The other end hesitated. Sophia, you wait. When we've saved enough money to buy a house, we'll get married. After hanging up the phone, I was in a daze for a few seconds and then turned myself back into my work. I knew that last night was not just a simple dinner party, but also a celebration party for Isabella's promotion. And at Isabella's event, how could James not go? James and I were college classmates. I majored in marketing, he majored in finance, and Isabella majored in journalism. When I first entered the university, I heard that there was a genius student in our school who had exceeded the admission score by 50 points to enter our school. That person was James. The first time I had close contact with James was because of a basketball game. In our freshman year, the school held a basketball game between departments. In the final, their finance class 1 faced our marketing class 2. James was the forward of the team. Throughout the game, his steps were light, and he shuttled on the court like a gust of wind. Every time he dribbled the ball, it was as if he was provoking the nerves of the opponents. The scores of the two teams were always very close. In the last minute, he grabbed the ball. Under the double team of the opponents, he first faked a move and deceived everyone, then leapt lightly. His body traced a perfect arc in the air, and the basketball passed through his fingertips. With a soft sound, it accurately fell into the basket. The whistle blew, and the game was over. Their team won. The sun was shining brightly that day. The sunlight shone on James, as if gilding him with a layer of gold. His already handsome facial features became more profound. At that moment, I heard the thumping sound of my accelerating heartbeat. The boy who shone brightly on the basketball court had quietly entered my heart. Later, someone posted a photo of James shooting on the school forum. I downloaded it and on a whim, set it as the background picture of my WeChat. We joined the same club organization and I had more interactions with him. My eyes couldn't help but look at him, and I quickly looked away before he noticed. I paid attention to his preferences. When buying drinks for the club, I would hand him a sugar-free Coke. When he came to the department for a meeting, I would wipe the seat he liked to sit and clean in advance. I couldn't help but pay attention to him, but I never thought of disturbing him. James and Isabella were the standard childhood sweethearts. James liked Isabella, and it was obvious to anyone with eyes. I thought they would be together, but I heard the news that Isabella was dating a senior. During that time, I watched helplessly as a high-spirited young man gradually became dejected. In our senior year, Isabella went abroad with that senior. On the day Isabella went abroad, James wanted to go to the airport to confess his love to Isabella, but he got into a car accident on the way, resulting in a fracture of his left leg. The doctor said that it was highly likely that it couldn't be restored to its normal state. I was scared to death when I heard the news. Whenever I had time, I would stay by his side in the hospital. For a whole half a year, I accompanied him to do rehabilitation exercises over and over again, search for healthy recipes and cook for him, and encouraged him to cheer up. At that time, I was working while taking care of him, and it was really hard. Half a year later, James' leg miraculously recovered. My task was completed, and I wanted to return to my original status, but James grabbed me and said, "Sophia, you like me, right? Then will you be my girlfriend?" I lowered my head and didn't dare to look at him for a long time. "James, I do like you, but I want to have a relationship with the goal of getting married, not just being moved for a moment. So have you thought it through?" James smiled and said, "I've thought it through. Let's have a relationship with the goal of getting married. I like you and want to be with you." In the afternoon, William called me into her office. She is my immediate superior and a successful career woman. She looked at me with satisfaction and said, "You're in good spirits today, and your complexion is also nice. You don't look like you used to." Always with a preoccupied look. Before I could say anything, she continued, "What about the thing I mentioned to you? Have you thought it through? The opportunity is very rare. Although it's a branch office, it's also a great opportunity for experience, which is equivalent to gilding yourself. I think you have the ability to take on this position. Okay, I want to apply." Her words of persuasion stopped abruptly, and she raised her eyebrows in disbelief. "Saying all?" I couldn't persuade you no matter how I tried before, but now your attitude has done a 180-degree turn. I'm a bit curious about the reason. What is it? My nose felt a bit sour, but the words I said carried a sense of relief. Because I've figured something out. I used to think that even if James was a stone, I could warm his heart over time. But later I realized that James wasn't a stone. If he really liked someone, he would be more proactive than anyone else. It's just that I'm not the one he has his heart set on. So no matter how much I do or how humble I am, it's all in vain. When it was almost time to get off work, James called and said he was at the entrance of the company. I looked out the window and indeed saw James' car. Feeling a bit surprised. James rarely picks me up because he thinks the subway near my workplace goes directly to our home and the transportation is convenient. By the time he drives to pick me up, I could have already been home. Although he said that, I was still a bit disappointed every time I saw my colleagues being picked up and dropped off by their boyfriends' cars. Without thinking much, I packed my things and went downstairs. I opened the passenger door, and Isabella was sitting there. Somehow a thought of as expected popped up in my mind, and my mood changed from a bit of anticipation before to complete indifference. Isabella greeted me warmly. "Hi, Sophia. How many times have I told you to call her sister-in-law?" James tapped Isabella on the head lightly. Isabella playfully stuck out her tongue at him. I looked at James, and seeing that he didn't say anything more, it seemed that the seating arrangement was just as it should be, and there was nothing wrong with it. My heart felt as if it had been swept by a cold wind. Indeed, people shouldn't have expectations. Otherwise, it's easy to get hurt. I said, "It's okay. It's just a form of address. You can call me whatever you like." As I said that, I went straight to the back seat. A year ago, Isabella came back to the country and planned to settle down in the city. After that, Isabella often appeared in James and my life. In the car, James and Isabella kept chatting, talking about today's work situation, which strange colleagues they had met, and which difficult customers they had encountered. I listened silently, feeling like an outsider who had intruded into their territory. No wonder they have the same topics, because they work in the same company. Or rather, the job Isabella has now is found by James for her. After Isabella came back to the country, she didn't have a job for a long time. It's not that she couldn't find one, but she was picky about jobs. She didn't want to do this or that. After picking and choosing, she couldn't find any job in the end. She herself wasn't in a hurry and enjoyed this carefree time. However, James was worried. As soon as he got off work, he would sit by the computer and study the positions suitable for Isabella. Isabella came to this city and doesn't know anyone here. Our two families are neighbors, and Isabella's mother specifically asked me to take good care of this younger sister. So, I can only worry more about it. This was how James explained it. Coincidentally, there was a vacant position in the advertising planning department of James' company at that time. James was extremely excited and thought he could definitely help Isabella get this position. He didn't like socializing and entertaining. But during that period, he often spent money to buy milk tea for his colleagues in the planning department and even treated the head of the planning department to dinner, trying to find out more information. He used to look down on the behavior of getting things done through connections. But he did it for Isabella. Then, he went to talk to the interviewers in the human resources department and personally taught Isabella interview skills, telling her how to answer to have a better chance of success. Isabella finally got this job and became James' colleague, and James contributed a great deal to it. I remembered that when I was interviewing for my current job, I had playfully asked James, a top student in our university, for advice on what clothes to wear for the interview to look more appropriate. I wanted him to help me simulate the interview scene to increase my chances of success. But James refused firmly, saying, "Sophia, if you can't even handle the interview calmly, even if you get this job in the future, you won't be able to fully do it well. So, why bother? It's better to change to another company as soon as possible." While I was lost in thought, the car stopped in front of a Thai restaurant. "Didn't you always want to try the Thai food here? Let's give it a try today," James said to me. As he spoke, the waiter led us into a private room. After James took his seat, Isabella naturally sat next to him. James was focused on looking at the menu and didn't notice, Or perhaps he was already used to it. I sat across from them. Sophia, I heard yesterday was your birthday. Isabella asked me with a smile. Yeah, it was. I glanced at James and found that he didn't even raise his head. If I had known, I should have prepared a gift for you. It's also James' fault for not telling me, Isabella said, giving James a reprochula flirt. James finally raised his head and teased, you? Come on, you're always broke at the end of the month. Do you still have money to buy gifts for others? Don't come to me to borrow money to pay off your credit card at the end of the month again. You don't need to worry about your sister-in-law's birthday gift. James snorted and started ordering dishes. After he ordered a few dishes, he passed the menu to me. I added a few more and deleted one of the dishes James had ordered before. You don't like this one? James asked. Yeah, it doesn't taste good. It's not authentic. James was a bit surprised. Have you been to this restaurant before? Yes, had its job before. I came here last week. With whom? I looked up blankly, with my colleagues. James frowned but didn't say anything. Isabella chuckled. Sophia, this restaurant was specially booked by James for you. He knows you like Thai food. How could you have tasted it with others first? That's a bit unkind. After saying that, James' frown deepened, and his gaze towards me carried more blame, as if I had done something to let him down. I found it rather amusing. Since the renovation of this restaurant started, James had been promising to take me here to try the food. When it finally opened, I invited him. But he declined, saying, there must be a lot of people now that it's newly opened. Why should we join in the hustle and bustle? Let's talk about it later. Half a year after it opened, I asked him again. He said, I'm not feeling well in my stomach recently and can't handle spicy food. Let's do it another day. Later, he simply refused directly, using the excuse of wanting to stay at home and not wanting to go out. It was James who had refused me so many times. How could it now seem like I was the one being unkind for not keeping the promise? I glanced at Isabella. The corners of her mouth turned up, revealing a hint of pride. I understood immediately. She was playing the innocent act with me? Well, I'll play along then. I pursed my lips and smiled, saying, well, if I hadn't been the vanguard to try and avoid the mistakes for you first, you would have just stepped into the pit. Right? By the way, how about watching a movie after dinner? The movie Flames at Dawn seems to be quite popular recently. Let's go and see it later. This sentence successfully made James and Isabella stunned. After a few seconds of pause, I pretended to be apologetic and said, oh, look at my memory. I forgot that your company had a team-building activity last week and booked the whole theater to watch this movie. You two already know the plot. Watching it again would really be a waste of time. James coughed softly, rubbed his nose, and said, let's eat first. Halfway through the dinner, the waiter brought to desserts. Hello, sir and madam. Our restaurant is having an event to celebrate its first anniversary. Each couple can receive 2 servings of coconut jelly as a gift. I wish you a pleasant meal. As he spoke, he placed the desserts in front of James and Isabella. James seemed to be stung by something and immediately flew into a rage. Do you have any sense of observation? That's my girlfriend over there. He pointed at me as he spoke. Isabella looked embarrassed. The waiter apologized repeatedly. I smiled at him amiably, put down my chopsticks, took out a piece of paper to wipe my mouth, and said, it doesn't matter. I'm full. You two can continue eating. The dinner ended unpleasantly like this. When getting into the car, James looked at me, as if he wanted to say something. I ignored him and directly went to the back seat. James pressed his lips tightly, which was a sign that he was in a bad mood. The car started, and the relaxed atmosphere on the way here was gone. Isabella looked at James for a while and didn't say anything more. When the car arrived in front of the house where Isabella rented, she said goodbye to us and immediately got out of the car and walked away. I was looking at the messages in the work group on my phone. Was your work going smoothly today? James said to me while looking at the rearview mirror. Yeah, it was okay. I replied without even looking up. William sent a message saying that the company would conduct an assessment of the management personnel who applied to be stationed in other places, probably next week, and asked me to prepare in advance and go all out. I replied to her, and at the same time, I flipped through and memorized some of the company document information saved on my phone. I don't know how long it had passed, but suddenly I felt a gaze fixed on me. I looked up and met James' eyes. I had always liked his eyes. They were as bright as stars, with a deep gaze, as if there was always an endless stream of affection. At this moment, those eyes were looking at me intently, with a hint of doubt and confusion. I avoided his gaze and looked out the window. James hesitated and asked, "Sophia, you don't need to work so hard." I smiled but didn't say anything. He asked again, "Next Friday? There will be a college classmates gathering, just the people from our finance class one. Would you like to go with me?" I looked at the memo on my phone and said, "There's a business dinner at the company next Friday. Besides, I'm not familiar with them, and I'll feel uncomfortable if I go." James explained, "Isabella wants to go. She's not familiar with them either, so you two can keep each other company." I shook my head. "I'm really not sure if I'll have the time. You two can go. Have a good time." James lowered his head and remained silent. We fell into a long period of silence. James has always been a man of few words. Every time we were in the car before, I would rack my brains to find topics to chat with James. It was not until James reminded me not to distract him from driving that I stopped talking. Today, for no particular reason, I felt it was boring. Work really takes a lot of energy, and talking would make me even more tired. It's better to save some energy. After getting home, I went straight into the study and continued with the unfinished work. James brought in a glass of milk and told me not to work too late. I nodded to show that I understood. But he still didn't leave. "Is there something wrong?" I asked. "The waiter today was blind and mistook Isabella for my girlfriend. You know that I only regard Isabella as my sister. Don't mind this matter." I stopped typing and looked at James. "It doesn't matter. It was the waiter's mistake. I didn't take it to heart." "Aren't you angry?" James was surprised. "Why should I be angry?" I retorted and continued typing. "Your two families are neighbors, and Isabella is younger than you. Her mother specifically asked you to take good care of this younger sister. So it's only natural for you to take care of her." This was the explanation James had given me before. When I cried, made a scene, and even became hysterical because he was busy taking care of Isabella and forgot our Valentine's Day date, he just looked at me quietly as I had an emotional breakdown. He always used this sentence to silence me, and then would quietly say, "If you can't accept it, and let's break up." At that time, I really loved him, even though I was full of grievances. I gave in. Alas, I was really spineless. James stared blankly at the standard answer I gave, but his brows furrowed tightly. He hesitated and then left the study. "That's good then. Don't work too late. Pay attention to a balance between work and rest." The next morning, after I finished washing up, I found that James had also gotten up. "Let's go. I'll drive you to work." James smiled and took my hand, leading me outside. I looked at our hands clasped together, frowned, but ultimately didn't pull my hand back. When getting into the car, James pressed the hand with which I was pulling the rear car door, opened the passenger door, and motioned for me to get in. I didn't say anything more and fastened my seatbelt. I originally wanted to cook some dumplings for breakfast this morning, but I found that we've run out of them. "Sophia, the dumplings you make taste really amazing. Let's make some more together on the weekend. The ones made outside are not as good as yours." I shook my head and yawned. "I'm busy recently and don't have the time." "Oh, okay." James seemed very disappointed. Half an hour later, the car drove steadily to the company. Just as I was about to get out of the car, James stopped me. "Sophia, it's too tiring for you to take the subway. From now on, I'll pick you up and drop you off every morning and afternoon." I turned my head to look at him. James was smiling brightly at me, looking confident, as if he was certain that I would agree, and was eagerly waiting to see the look of anticipation and surprise on my face. Unfortunately, I pretended to think for a while and said, "Your route to the company is not on the way to mine. It will be quite troublesome for you to drive me to work and then go to your company every day. Besides, after you drop me off, when will you have the time to pick up Isabella?" This obviously exceeded the scope of what James had thought about. mentioned this matter by me, James was at a loss for words. He wanted to find a solution that would satisfy both sides, but he stammered and didn't know how to solve it. I raised my eyes and said word by word, Isabella came to this city and doesn't know anyone here. Your two families are neighbors, and Isabella's mother specifically asked you to take good care of his younger sister. So, you'd better worry more about her. James heard this sentence twice within 24 hours. Only then did he realize that I was deliberately using his previous words to stop him. He was a bit angry and flustered. He tried to hold my hand, but I dodged it. I gave him a bright smile. I'm here, James.
Goodbye.
After Isabella joined the company, she didn't buy a car and also disliked the unpleasant smell and noisy sound of the bus and subway. So, James took the initiative to take on the task of picking her up and dropping her off. He would drive to the downstairs of the house where Isabella rented every day and wait for her to go to the company together. But James never thought about how I had managed to take the subway these past few years. He also never calculated that the distance from his place to the house where Isabella rented was actually almost the same as the distance to my company. He was willing to drive a little further and spend more time picking up Isabella every day, rain or shine. But he wasn't willing to spend that energy on picking me up and dropping me off. Before Isabella came back to the country, I didn't feel his neglect. But after she came back, the contrast was so obvious. James even forgot that I had asked him for a promise when he bought the car. I said that he should not let female peers sit in the passenger seat, otherwise I would be angry. He even blamed me for being overly jealous and said he wouldn't do that. But in the end, he easily gave that seat to Isabella. Maybe he didn't forget, but just didn't care. Just like countless times before, he wantonly challenged my bottom line and was certain that I wouldn't be angry or leave. He used my love for him to manipulate me. Well, this time James is going to be disappointed because I'm already tired of this messy relationship. I want to get out of this situation as soon as possible. I solemnly handed in the application form, and William nodded in satisfaction, saying, "You've finally made the right choice." I smiled with relief and said, "One can't trip over the same stilt twice. I hope it's not too late." 3 months ago, the company planned to establish a branch in Ningchong and wanted to select some key employees from the company to take up important positions there. And Ningchong is my hometown. Many leaders in the company, including William, had their eyes on me. I had been hesitant before because James was here. Now that I think about it, I was really stupid. I have no reason to refuse a job with a promising future, good pay, and close to home. As I expected, James was giving me the cold shoulder again, just like every time before. In the past, whenever I mentioned Isabella, James would be like a dragon touched on a transverse scale and condemn me for being petty. "Sophia, there's no possibility between me and Isabella. You shouldn't have such great hostility towards her." "Sophia, I've known Isabella much longer than I've known you. She's already like a family member to me. Although we're boyfriend and girlfriend, you can't limit my right to socialize with others." "Sophia, that's just Isabella's personality. But she has no ill intentions. You've always been gentle and considerate, so you won't mind, right?" James firmly stood on Isabella's side, accusing me of being unreasonable with a rapprochement of look and helpless words. Then he would wait for me to soften up. And then he would patiently reason with me, saying that I was being narrow-minded and finally generously forgive me. He was enthusiastic about this and never got tired of it. But this time it's a bit different. Because James' cold violence doesn't work on me anymore. Or rather, I didn't even notice it. After that outburst in the car that day, when I got home in the evening, I found that James wasn't there. I didn't care either. He often came home late, and I was used to it. I cooked myself a bowl of noodles with an egg, found a drama to watch while eating. After eating, I simply washed up and then started reading professional books, studying business cases, and charging myself with knowledge in a timely manner. When James was at home, he sometimes played games with his microphone on. Now that he wasn't there, my work efficiency even increased. I actually felt a long-lost sense of comfort and pleasure in the days without James' interruption. It wasn't until the afternoon of the 7th day that James' message finally arrived. He explained that he had received a temporary task from the company a week ago and is now out of town. He asked me what I had been doing these days, and I told him the truth.
Suddenly,
A strange sentence appeared on the screen. I haven't slept well these days, and then it was deleted in an instant. It was so fast that I thought James had sent it to the wrong person. After a while, James sent a message saying, "Sophia, the company sent me on a business trip a week ago. I left in a hurry and didn't have time to tell you. I'll be back this afternoon. My flight arrives at 6. Come and pick me up. I also want to eat the braised pork ribs you make. Go to the supermarket and buy some ingredients first and cook them to me tonight." Looking at the message, I felt inexplicably annoyed. I thought about the recent work matters that I could hardly handle, and I really didn't have the mood to cook. There was no need to pick him up either. He wasn't a child, and I wasn't worried that he would get lost. I replied, "I have to work overtime. I don't have time. I'm busy." He didn't reply with any message after that. When it was almost time to get off work, William called me to her office and asked me to accompany her to a dinner party on the spot. The client at the dinner table had quite a background, which could be seen from William's polite and flattering demeanor. Since the leader was like this as a subordinate, I should be even more courteous. After the meal, I felt dizzy from drinking. William patted me on the shoulder and said earnestly, "Sophia, can you digest all the information that was said at the dinner table tonight? In the future, when you go to the branch company, there will be no shortage of such occasions. You still have a lot to learn." I nodded. I called a taxi for her and watched her leave. "Sophia," James called out to me. I stopped in the middle of hailing a DD ride and looked at him blurrily as he walked towards me. He supported me and said with a hint of concern in his tone, "Why did you drink so much?" I tilted my head and looked at him without answering. James helped me into the car and fast and my seatbelt. "I went to your company to pick you up today, but couldn't find you. If I hadn't asked the receptionist, I wouldn't have known you were here. I've told you that you don't have to work so hard. Why don't you listen?" I giggled. My mind was already not very clear. But I still answered firmly, "I haven't saved enough for the down payment on the house yet. I need money in many places. How can I not work hard? Who else can I rely on?" James' hand on the steering wheel paused, and he looked at me for a long time without saying a word. In the following days, James picked me up and dropped me off every day. And I never met Isabella in the car again. Sometimes when I worked overtime, he would wait for me downstairs at the company. Sometimes he worked overtime, and I would have dinner in the company cafeteria and then take the subway home. James seemed to have changed. He would take the initiative to do the housework after work every day and even cook on his own initiative. I had only heard Isabella say before that James had a talent for cooking, but I never knew it and never had the chance to taste his cooking. After we got together, I usually did the cooking. Occasionally, James would help out, such as picking and washing vegetables or making a cold dish. More often, he liked to stay in his room and play games after work. Therefore, I never knew that he was actually so good at cooking. He could cook many dishes, and the taste was getting closer and closer to my preferences. I'm not picky about food. I eat whatever he cooks. Sometimes if I don't like a dish very much, I eat less of it. He noticed this and wouldn't cook that dish next time. We were just like every couple struggling in a big city, living an ordinary and warm life. But I knew that things were different. I no longer had any emotions towards James. As if he were a stranger to me. I no longer look forward to his arrival, and I no longer feel lost when he is absent. Sometimes when he didn't come to pick me up, I actually felt relieved. In this way, I could do more of the things I wanted to do, such as having dinner parties with colleagues, going shopping, watching movies, and enjoying these moments that I could freely control. On the weekend, James invited me to watch a movie, but I wasn't interested. I made an excuse that I had to go to the company to get some documents and left. I stayed in the office for the whole morning to study and recharge myself, leaving James at home. Halfway through, James sent me a message asking me when I would be back approximately. I replied that I didn't know. He immediately sent me a red envelope, saying that he would wait for me at home and asking me to take a taxi home after I was done. At the end, he also attached an emoji with expectant starry eyes. I opened the red envelope and replied, "Okay." I still took the subway home. As soon as I opened the door, I even suspected that I had entered the wrong place. The living room had obviously been carefully decorated. The balloons were arranged in the shape of a heart, and there were steaks and wine on the table. The chandelier was adjusted to a dark yellow color. James stood at the door holding a large bouquet of roses and looked at me expectantly, saying, "Happy 26th birthday, Sophia. Welcome home." I hesitated and took the flowers. James hugged me tightly. Then he turned around and pulled out a chair, inviting me to sit down. He cut the steak and brought it to my mouth. I took a bite, and it tasted good. Besides the steak, there were also several dishes that I liked on the table. I went to the supermarket this afternoon to select these ingredients. They are very fresh. Try them quickly. Under James' expectant gaze, I tasted each dish one by one. The perch melts in the mouth. The stir-fried shrimps are crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. The braised asparagus are tender and juicy. The mushroom soup is fragrant and appetizing, and even the scrambled eggs with tomatoes are sweet and sour, making people's mouths water. I smiled and said, "It's really delicious. You've put a lot of effort into it." After hearing this, James seemed to let out a long sigh of relief. He took out a box from his pocket and said, "Sophia, although your birthday has passed, I still want to say happy birthday again. I hope this blessing isn't too late." When the lid was opened, an exquisitely crafted dime and ring lay there quietly. "Sophia, I ignored you before. From this moment on, I will put you first. You don't have to work so hard in the future. I will be your strongest support. Sophia, will you marry me?" I lowered my head and stroked the dazzling diamond ring in the box. The diamond sparkled brightly under the light. I was just about to speak when James' phone rang. James took a look at it, frowned, and hung up the phone. Soon, the phone rang again, and James hung up again. "Aren't you going to answer it?" I smiled and looked at James. He looked embarrassed. Finally, under my gaze, he answered the phone. After a while, the impatience on James' face disappeared, replaced by nervousness and panic. Okay, I'll come right away." Then he hesitated and said to me with a hint of apology, "Sophia, there are some problems with the project I'm in charge of. The company asked me to go back. I can't have dinner with you anymore." I nodded and handed him an umbrella, saying, "It's raining outside." Doctor, carefully. He gave me a gentle look and tried to kiss me, but I interrupted him with a laugh and urged him to go out. As soon as he left, I put away my smile and continued to enjoy the delicious food on the table. The diamond ring was tossed aside by me. I almost hesitated. The call was from Isabella. In fact, when James and I were at home before, Isabella would also call. James usually took a look at me and then got up to answer the call outside. I didn't know what they talked about, but every time James finished answering the call, he would be absent and smiled for a while. James thought I didn't know who was on the other end of the phone, but Isabella's voice was too distinctive. Even if James lowered the volume of the phone, and even if it was just a simple hello from the other side, I could tell it was her. I pretended not to know and watched silently as James made up stories. I even nodded in cooperation and urged him to leave to be busy with work. It's ridiculous. If James had a clear conscience, why would he lie to me? If they were innocent enough, why would they act so secretly? It turned out that nothing had changed. I was just delusional. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what happens. James came back a few hours later. After getting home, he was in a daze for a while. 3 days later in the evening, after picking me up, James didn't drive me home as usual. Instead, he drove to a high-end hotel. "Why are we here?" I was puzzled. "Sophia, there's a dinner party for our department today. The department head said we could bring our family members. Let's go." He took my hand and was about to walk inside. Suddenly, a red Audi A4 stopped in front of us. The car door opened, and Isabella slowly walked over. "James, you're here. Looked, isn't my knicker nice?" Isabella showed a bright smile, which spread across her face like a blooming flower. As she spoke, she had already hooked her arm through James. James was taken aback, and he glanced at her and turned to look at me. He quickly pulled his arm out in a hurry. Isabella also saw me standing aside following his gaze. The surprise in her eyes was evident. Sophia, why are you here too? This is an internal team-building activity of our company. James was dissatisfied with Isabella's tone of voice. He glanced at Isabella and said, Isabella, family members are allowed to attend this team-building activity. Realizing her mistake, Isabella quickly tried to make up for it.
Oh,
I was just worried that Sophia would be bored. Isabella turned around and took an umbrella out of the car and handed it to me. Look at my memory. I just remembered. James left his umbrella with me before. Judging by the style, it should be yours.
Sophia, here you are.
James grabbed Isabella. Okay, is this the time to talk about this? Let's go in quickly. There was a look of panic on his face. I didn't take it and pushed it back to her. Isabella, I have a lot of umbrellas. I'll give this one to you. Then I took the lead and walked inside. James closely followed behind me, holding my hand tightly again. I could feel that his palm was sweating. I didn't know many of James' colleagues, and Daphne was one of them. When she saw me, she warmly patted the empty seat beside her, motioning for me to sit next to her. After I sat down, while James went to get drinks, she quietly leaned over and whispered in my ear, You finally have time to come. Were you that busy before? I invited you several times, but you didn't come.
What?
I was confused. I didn't receive any invitation. There were several team-building activities in the company before where family members were allowed. James said you were busy with work and wouldn't come. Daphne was also surprised. I fell silent and saw James walking towards me with 2 glasses of drinks.
Thank you.
I took the orange juice. Why are you being so polite with me? James smiled and sat down closely beside me.
What were you two talking about?
James took my left hand and stroked it in his palm.
Just chatting.
I withdrew my hand under the pretext of looking at my phone.
James sat with me for a while.
He didn't leave until someone called him to play poker. I saw Isabella also run to that table to join in the fun. She was excitedly talking to James behind his back. I'm really confused. Is James' girlfriend Isabella, or the girl who came today? Suddenly, I heard 2 girls talking at another table. Due to the angle, they didn't notice my presence. I'm confused too. I saw with my own eyes that they went to and from work together. Isabella comes to our department to chat whenever she has time and always asks everyone to help her with things. Many times when she made mistakes, it was James who gave her advice and took care of the aftermath.
Exactly.
Have you ever seen a girl ask her boss to borrow a sanitary napkin during her period? Last time when Isabella was on her period, James borrowed one from a girl in their department and sent someone to deliver it to the toilet. Anyway, their relationship is not ordinary. Absolutely.
Today,
James brought that girl here, and Isabella looked really angry when she came in. Her eyes were even red.
Serves her right.
Isabella is used to throwing her weight around in the company. Now that the real girlfriend is here, let's see how she can still show off, Daphne explained awkwardly beside me. Sophia, they don't know the truth and are just talking nonsense. Don't take it to heart. I asked, do Isabella and James get along so closely in the company? Daphne scratched her head, her eyes shifting uneasily. She hesitated and said, well, a little bit. That Isabella. Is she your classmate, and she's from the same hometown as James? Then, Daphne nodded in Isabella's direction and said to me, Sophia, you should come to our company more often. I've been here for a long time and know that you and James are a couple. But those new colleagues of ours don't know. If you come a few more times, you can shut their mouths. I really can't stand Isabella's pretentious behavior. However, it seems that James has suddenly realized something recently. He hasn't been getting so close to Isabella and the company, and he seems to be avoiding her after work too. I lowered my eyes, my mind filled with the things those 2 girls had discussed just now. I remembered once when the workers came to check and repair the air conditioner at home. I was in a special period and found that I had run out of sanitary napkins. Since I couldn't get away for a while, I sent a message asking James, who was on his way home from work, to buy a pack for me. Afraid that he wouldn't know how to buy it, I even took a photo of the cover of the sanitary napkin I usually used and showed it to him. I didn't get a reply from James, and he came back empty-handed. When he came back, James was a bit angry. Sophia, how could you ask me to buy this kind of thing? I'm a man. People will think I'm crazy if I buy this. And this is your own business. If he didn't prepare well and suffered, you should learn your lesson. Stock up on more next time. After saying that, he opened the refrigerator door, took out a can of ice-cold Coke, took a big gulp, turned the air conditioner up to the maximum, and went back to the room contentedly. Soon, the sound of his laughter while playing games with the microphone on came from inside. I stood there in a daze for a long time. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead, but my hands and feet were ice-cold. The colicky pain in my abdomen made me almost unable to stand steadily. I kept muttering the word lesson over and over again. Finally, I let out a sigh and turned around to go downstairs and buy the sanitary napkins. At that time, I tried to understand him and never made such a request again. But when I came to Isabella, how could he be so willing to do it and so unashamed? I sincerely thanked Daphne. Thank you for telling me all this. But I would decline her suggestion. It was still early for dinner, so I went to the bathroom to touch up my makeup. When I came out, I accidentally got lost and walked to the door of an empty private room. There were people inside speaking in a low voice. What a day. Why do I keep overhearing other people's private conversations? I mocked myself. Just as I was about to leave, the voice of a man made me stop in my tracks. It was James and Isabella inside. I didn't know what James had said, but Isabella's voice rose a bit. Why? Why can't I buy the same car as yours? Can only you drive this kind of car? After a pause, her tone became gentle. James, you're still the best to me. I've asked my parents many times for a car, but they refused to buy it for me. Yet you transferred 200,000 yuan to me without hesitation. Together with the money I saved before, it was just enough to buy this car. James became anxious. I did it because I thought it was inconvenient for you to go to work. And you just wanted to buy a commuting car, so I transferred the money. But now you've bought the same model and the license plate number is also very similar to mine. What will our colleagues in the company think? What will Sophia think? Isabella sneered and said sarcastically, What are you afraid of? We're innocent. Nothing has happened between us. James, you've been very cold to me recently. You avoid me in the company, and I often can't find you after work. Didn't you promise me that even if you had a girlfriend, our relationship would remain the same? And I would always be the most important person to you? After hearing this, James let out a sigh and said, Isabella, I want to get married. Sophia has a good personality, strong work ability, and she's also very good to me. She's a very suitable person for marriage. Now that you have a stable job and bought a car, and I've paid a year's rent for the house you're renting in one go. Now you can take care of yourself. Isabella took a step forward and hugged James. James, when I broke up with my senior in France, I was completely disheartened. It was you who specially flew over to accompany me and encourage me. That's why I came back without hesitation. We've known each other for more than 20 years. I know your preferences. What is she, Sophia? She's just a thief who took advantage of my absence in these for years. Are you happy with her, James? Ask yourself, who do you choose between me and her? I stood there in a daze. I thought James had only reconnected with Isabella in the half year since she came back to the country. I never expected it to be so early. So early that when he was with me, he couldn't wait to send his care from thousands of miles away. How ridiculous. Then what was I in these for years, just a part of their ambiguous game? How can people be so bad? I clenched my fists. I was already completely disappointed and didn't love him anymore, but at this moment, I was still stabbed in the back. I felt that my 4 years of youth were wasted. An unprecedented sense of humiliation from being deceived welled up in my heart. Fine, very good. At this moment I heard Jane say softly, Isabella, I'm in a very confused state of mind now and need to think it over carefully. The string of reason finally snapped when I heard this sentence. With a creak, I pushed open the half-closed door. Looking at the two startled people, I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down, but it was in vain. A sense of powerlessness rushed from all corners of my body to my brain, and I even felt a little nauseous and wanted to vomit. Looking at James, after being extremely disappointed, I actually felt a bit of relief. I said word by word, "There's no need to think anymore. I'm out. I wish you happiness." After saying that, I picked up my bag and walked towards the door. Just as I reached the entrance of the hotel, James chased after me. He was in a hurry, his eyes bloodshot. He grabbed my hand and said, "Sophia, don't go. Listen to my explanation." His grip was so strong that it hurt my hand. I pried his fingers off one by one, no need. "The dinner party is about to start. You can be busy with your business. I'll go back by myself."
As I said that,
I hailed a taxi and left in a cloud of dust. As soon as I got back to the house that James and I rented, I started packing my things. James rushed over in a hurry and grabbed the hand with which I was packing. "Let go." I tried to pull my hand back, but I didn't succeed. "Sophia,
calm down.
listen to my explanation." James hugged me from behind, his voice trembling a little. James' warm chest pressed against my back, and his warm breath blew against my ear. But I didn't feel any warmth.
It was as if I was wrapped around by a huge python.
Sticky and unable to break free. That feeling of wanting to vomit came back again. I gave up resistance and closed my eyes. "James, let's talk." Upon hearing this, James' grip loosened, and I took the opportunity to break free from his embrace. I took a few steps back to stop him from getting closer, crossed my arms, and said, "Didn't you say you wanted to explain? Go ahead, I'm listening." Perhaps he had never seen my serious expression before. James opened his mouth slightly and said hesitantly, "Sophia, is it because I forgot your birthday? You're still angry, aren't you? You've been acting strange since that day. I'm sorry. I'll change. I will never forget your birthday again and will remember every important day. If you don't like me picking up and dropping off Isabella, I won't do it. I'm already keeping my distance from her." I didn't say anything. He continued, "I'll come back right after work every day and cook the food you like. I just want to live a down-to-earth life with you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have proposed to you. Sophia, maybe I neglected you before and paid more attention to Isabella. But that's because you're mature and steady. And I never have to worry about you when you do things. On the contrary, Isabella has been spoiled since she was a child, and I always have to clean up her messes. I had no choice. I couldn't bear to leave her alone. Sophia, I didn't cheat. I haven't done anything to betray you. What do you want me to do for you to believe me? If you don't want to have contact with Isabella, you don't have to meet her in the future. Is that okay, Sophia?"
Say something.
I looked up at James. Looking at the man I had been with day and night for 4 years, there was anxiety and expectation in his eyes, but there was no guilt at all. I shook my head and smiled, then closed my eyes. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, making them sore. This tear seemed to take away the last bit of my feelings for James. James looked at me uneasily. I slowly opened my mouth and said, "Didn't you say that a man carrying sanitary napkins would make people think there was something wrong with his mind? Then why did you help Isabella borrow that thing?" James was taken aback. He didn't expect me to know about this. After a long while, James explained, "She needed it urgently at that time. I had no choice but to borrow it for her." I didn't think too much about it. I nodded to show that I understood and continued to ask. "Before, you said there were some problems with the project you were in charge at and the company asked you to go back. In fact, you went to Isabella's place, right? She fell and got injured at home because the floor was too slippery, so I went to check on her. Nothing happened between us." I sneered. "Are you a doctor, or doesn't she know how to call the emergency number?" James fell silent. I continued to ask, "You advanced a year's rent for the house Isabella rented, right?" "Yes. Isabella didn't have much money when she just came back to the country, so I paid it in advance. I won't do it again next time. You stopped picking Isabella up and dropping her off for work, but you simply gave her 200,000 yuan to buy a car. Is this your solution?" James mumbled, "I lent that money to Isabella, not gave it to her. She will pay it back." There were so many things to criticize that I didn't even have the energy to do so. Looking at James, who was still at a loss and didn't know where he was wrong, I suppressed the disappointment and helplessness in my heart and asked him, "Do you know how much our annual rent is?" Do you know how much the camera I gave you costs? Do you know how much the gaming computer I bought for you on your birthday costs? Do you know how much a caddy of beef costs in the supermarket? Do you know how much the food we eat every night costs? Do you know how much effort and money it takes to buy the things in this house? What are you talking about this for now? James stared at me with a frown, puzzled, and asked, "What does this have to do with you wanting to break up with me?" I smiled and said, "James, I'm not a picky person. I've never calculated clearly the things I bought for this house. I think it's only right. But you don't think these things just fell from the sky, do you? The drinks and snacks you like are always stocked in the refrigerator all year round. You like that camera and the high-performance gaming computer. At that time, we were poor and our salaries were not high. You thought they were expensive and reluctant to buy them. I secretly found part-time jobs and took on private orders to save money and bought them for you. Since you have a weak stomach, I've been racking my brains every day to make different kinds of breakfast for you. You said I have a good personality and strong ability and am suitable for marriage. But you never said that you love me." James wanted to speak, but I stopped him. "You keep saying that you want to marry me." Then he suddenly bought an engagement ring and cooked a meal, expecting me to agree to you. "But what about the other preparations? Have you met my parents? Have you prepared the wedding house? We agreed to save money to buy a wedding house and then get married. I've been working hard towards this goal. What about you? How much have you saved?" Jane's face turned red and white at my words. "I will work hard to save money. I'll go back now and tell my parents about us and discuss the matters related to our marriage with them. I will visit your uncle and aunt and make them feel at ease to hand you over to me. I will also prepare the wedding house." I shook my head. "You still don't understand what I'm trying to say. As they say online, where your money is, your heart is. Look, Isabella has only been back in the country for half a year. And you've thought of everything and arranged everything for her. You found her a job, rented a house for her, and even helped her get a car. But we've been together for 4 years. Have you ever spent so much energy, time, and money planning for our future? You said you didn't cheat and didn't do anything to betray me. What exactly do you mean by that? Kissing and having sex? Then I believe you haven't done that yet. But does it have to get to that extent to be considered a hurt? Your indifference, always having to choose between me and Isabella every time, and not being able to give me your whole heart, isn't that a hurt? In the future, after we get married, you're being at Isabella's beck and call. Isn't that a hurt? Your performance during this period is just a remedy, because you sense the change in my attitude. But have you really realized your mistake? Do you really think you were wrong? James, I'm already tired of this kind of life. I don't want to be chosen instead of being the only one in our future life. I don't want to be lost in wild thoughts and then be laughed at by you for making a big deal out of nothing and being melodramatic. I just want to find someone who loves me wholeheartedly, carefully plans for our future together, and works hard to make it a reality. Obviously, you're not that person. If you like Isabella, go after her bravely. After all, you've had feelings for each other for so many years. I just don't want to be involved anymore. Let's break up." "No, Sophia, James stammered nervously. He tried to hold my hand, but I slapped it away. "Now, are you going to leave this house? Or should I leave?" As I said that, I repacked the luggage on the floor and pulled the suitcase, ready to go out. James's face turned red with shame at my words. He grabbed my suitcase and said in a low voice, "Don't. It's not safe for you to go out at night." I'll leave. The room returned to silence. After venting all the resentment that had been pent up in my heart for a long time, I suddenly felt refreshed. Just today, William told me that the company had approved my transfer application. In another month, I can leave the city and go back to my hometown to work. What's more, my salary will be the same as here, or even higher. It's really great. My hometown is a first-tier city in a neighboring province not far from the city. James is from the capital city of another province. We both came to this super first-tier city to study in university. After graduating from university, I didn't have a specific direction at first. But since James wanted to stay, I also set the goal of settling down and starting a career in the city. James and I agreed that each of us would save a sum of money every month as the fund for buying a house. I've been following this agreement, but now it's no longer necessary. However, I still want to thank myself for my persistence over the past few years. Now, the money in my account is enough for me to buy a small apartment in my hometown. Next, I spent 2 hours taking stock of all the things in the house. I also packed James's things by the way and waited for him to come and pick them up. I also took stock of my things. There were quite a few. I opened Genu, a second-hand trading platform, and listed some of the idle items online, trying to make the most of their remaining value. Suddenly a call came in. Sophia, it's me. I'm in Hai Ching now. I thought I had made myself clear last time, but it seems James didn't understand. After being depressed for a few days, he started sending me messages frantically. He would send a large bouquet of yellow roses every day, along with a long apology letter. Sophia, have you calmed down? I know I was wrong. Forgive me this time. Sophia, I will put you first in everything in the future and won't have any contact with Isabella anymore. Sophia, please say something. I don't want to break up with you. He kept saying things like this over and over again. Even now, he still thinks I'm just angry. Even Daphne sent me a message asking, Sophia, James has been in a really low mood these days. He's like a time bomb that could explode at any moment, and none of us dare to provoke him. He's made several low-level mistakes at work, and the leader has talked to him. By the way, Isabella came to see him, and he directly made Isabella cry by scolding her. So, did you have a fight with James? I replied to her. We didn't have a fight. We broke up. After work, as soon as I left the company, it started to rain. It was the rush hour after work, and I was calculating whether taking a taxi or running to the subway station would take less time. Before I knew it, James had already stood in front of me. Sophia, I'm here to pick you up. I rolled my eyes inwardly and didn't want to say a word. However, James couldn't see my indifference and kept trying to find topics to talk about. Sophia, the temperature has dropped. You should wear more when you go out. It's warm in my car. Come in quickly. Sophia, didn't you say you wanted to get a cat before? I thought about it. Let's get a ragdoll. It's pretty and clingy. Sophia, that celebrity you like is going to have a concert. It's this weekend and it won't interfere with your work. I managed to get to tickets with great difficulty. Let's go and see it together. Enough. I was so annoyed that I interrupted his chatter. I thought I made it clear last time. It seems you still don't understand. So, I'll say it again. We have already broken up. James pursed his lips, and it took him a long time to force a smile. He said, Sophia, I don't want to break up. I will change all the things you mentioned. Can you give me another chance? Doesn't our 4-year relationship mean anything? I don't believe you have no feelings for me anymore.
How dare you say that?
I was rendered speechless by James' shameless behavior. Just as I was about to speak, a pair of hands with distinct knuckles pulled me back and into his embrace. I turned my head and saw that Julian had his arm around my shoulder, protecting me. He stood between me and James. Confronting him, he raised his eyebrows and looked at James. Didn't you hear what Sophia said? You two have already broken up. This is a notice, not a negotiation. What's with all this talk about your 4-year relationship? It's really laughable. If you really cared about Sophia, would you, in your little childhood sweetheart, keep bullying her like this time and time again? Put away your false feelings and get lost. James was stunned by this sudden turn of events. When he came to his senses, he looked at us in disbelief. Sophia, who is this? He pointed at Julian and stared straight at me. Julian clicked his tongue, took a step forward, and extended his right hand to him provocatively. Hello, ex-boyfriend. I'm Julian. I grew up with Sophia. I'm Sophia's childhood sweetheart. You. James was furious, and his face turned livid. I just thought it was ridiculous. What? Is being a childhood sweetheart your exclusive privilege? I ignored James and affectionately took Julian's arm, asking softly, Why are you here? It's raining, and I was worried about you. But it's just as well I'm here. Otherwise, how would you deal with him? You won't be deceived by his few words again, will you? Julian glanced at James, and there was a trace of worry in his eyes when he looked at me.
How could that be?
I'm very clear-headed now and won't be that stupid again, I replied with a smile. James opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. Considering the rain, it would be too time-consuming and laborious to go to the supermarket to buy ingredients and then cook. So we decided to find a restaurant and have hot pot. As soon as we sat down, James came in right after us and sat at the table next 2 hours. All the way, no matter where we went, he followed us at a leisurely pace. I was already used to it, except that it was a bit of an eyesore. Julian snapped at him. Hey, that ex-boyfriend, a qualified ex should be like he's dead. Who allowed you to show up and harass Sophia?
Get lost.
You? James gritted his teeth. I tempted Julian's arm. Don't pay attention to him. Let's just eat our food. James stared at me for a long time, opening and closing his mouth as if he wanted to say something but didn't. After ordering the food, Julian went to prepare the dipping sauce for me. James kept staring at me, frowning and not saying a word, with a somewhat aggrieved look in his eyes. Julian came back soon and handed me a full stack of green things. Aren't you her childhood friend? Don't you even know Sophia's preferences? Sophia doesn't like coriander and mashed garlic, James said contemptuously. He said this to Julian, but his face was turned towards me. Julian slapped the table with a smack and mucked at James to staff Neely. You were with Sophia for 4 years, and yet you don't even know that since she was a child, she has loved coriander and mashed garlic. She always orders and eats them when having stir-fried dishes, noodles, or hot pot. How could you not know this?
What?
James looked at me in shock. He really never knew this. When we were in the student union at university, during a department dinner, James once said that he didn't like coriander, mashed garlic, and other pungent foods. After we got together, to take his feelings into account, I never ate these in front of him, and I wouldn't put them in the dishes I cooked either. But later I found out that Isabella also liked to add coriander and mashed garlic to her food. James could accept this well, and would even specifically ask the restaurant for a serving and bring it to Isabella every time they had a meal together. I was gambling on when James would discover my preferences. Unfortunately, he never did. Until now. A humble love can't win true affection. Fortunately, it's over, and I don't need to pretend anymore. I picked up a slice of lamb roll, dipped it in the sauce, and ate it. Then I gave a thumbs up and praised, "It's delicious." Julian smiled even more brightly. James stared at me blankly, with an indescribable emotion surging in his eyes. He ordered a table full of hot pot, but didn't touch a bite. As we were getting close to the rented house, James quickened his pace and blocked our way. "Sophia, I have something I want to say to you." I ignored him, but he kept approaching me step by step, with an unusual look of nervousness on his face. "Hey, stay away from her." Julian reached out to stop him. "Where on earth did you come from?" James was on the verge of a breakdown. "Mr. Julian, why are you still here so late? It's time for you to go back. I have something to say to Sophia. Please leave." There was a moment of silence. Julian curled his lips into a smile, turned to look at me, and said in a light tone with a hint of amusement, "Where should I go back to? I live here."
Sophia invited me. What?
James seemed to have received a huge blow. His face was filled with disbelief, and he stared at me, wanting to hear my explanation. I ignored him. It didn't matter anymore. Why should I explain anything to him? It's my rented house, and I have the right to decide who can live in it.
Bang.
I opened the door and walked in. I remembered the luggage that James hadn't picked up yet and immediately went in and carried it all out. I was going to contact you to ask when you were free to come and pick up your luggage. Now that you're here, it's just right. It's better to do it today than another day. Take it away. He stood there motionless. I got impatient waiting. Just as I was about to remind him, unexpectedly, Jane suddenly grabbed my wrist forcefully and pulled me into the inner room and locked the door. He leaned forward, pinned me against the doorframe, and leaned in to kiss my lips. He pried open my mouth and kissed me deeply. His fine breath hit my face, and I felt suffocated. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I struggled desperately to push him away. I slapped him hard across the face with all my strength. James, are you crazy? James grinned, looking half crazed, but tears kept streaming down his face. And his expression was desolate. Sophia, where did this person come from? Why did you let him live in our house? This is our home. You were so eager to pack my luggage. Were you trying to kick me out and make room for this person? Tell me it's not true. Boom, the door was smashed open. Julian swung his fist and punched James hard in the face. Damn it. You're still haunting her even after breaking up. I've wanted to beat you up for a long time. Julian's fists rained down on James' head and body. James soon got bruised, and his lips were bleeding. But he still refused to back down. He took the opportunity and fought back with all his might. Julian also got a heavy punch to his eye. Stop. When James heard my voice, he paused for a moment. But then he saw me kneeling in front of Julian, nervously touching Julian's eye. Let me see if your eye is injured. Can you still see? This little injury is nothing. I can take it. Julian covered his eye and proudly raised his head with a look of disdain. Don't be brave. You've been in poor health since you were a child. Don't be so impulsive next time. Don't get hurt for someone who doesn't matter. I said with heartache and gently massaged his eye. Sophia, James covered his head and shouted at me. His voice hoarse, don't look at him. Turn around and look at me. I'm injured too. My injury is more serious than his. Sophia, don't be so nice to him. I can't stand it. James looked at me, his voice seeming to choke in his throat, sour and unpleasant. I stared at him, and through him, I seemed to see my humble self in the past. I chuckled softly, feeling a bit pleased in my heart. There's no way around it. He and I are childhood sweethearts. We've known each other for many years before I met you. You showed me the way childhood sweethearts get along, making me reflect on whether I was too harsh on him before. I should be more considerate and caring. Thank you for teaching me this. The tears in Jane's eyes reflected the fragmented light and fell at this moment. The days that followed passed quickly. During the day, Julian drove me to the company, and in the evening, he picked me up. We chatted and laughed all the way. We went to the nearest supermarket together to buy groceries and cook at home. Occasionally, when we didn't feel like cooking, we would go to a nearby hot pot restaurant for a meal. On weekends, I took Julian to visit the scenic areas around the city. Although I said I was taking him, in fact, it was he who was showing me around. To be honest, during the 8 years from my school days to graduation, I had never thoroughly explored the surrounding areas. Julian has a playful personality. He quickly put together a travel itinerary. He led me through alleys, visited local residences, climbed mountains, and crossed rivers. We had a great time. During this period, Daphne sent me a message. Sophia, do you know? James reported Isabella. Isabella has been fired.
Why?
I was puzzled. The reason is that James wanted Isabella to pay back the money. It turned out that Isabella owed James more than 300,000 yuan. My goodness. That's a lot of money. James showed the transfer records and demanded that Isabella pay it back, but Isabella refused, saying that the money was a voluntary gift from James. Since there was no IOU, it was very difficult to get the money back. In a fit of anger, James reported to the company that Isabella had previously stolen a colleague's idea and obtained the position of project team leader. Is there really something going on between James and Isabella? For no apparent reason, why would James lend so much money to Isabella? I didn't reply. A few days later, Daphne sent another message. Damn. I know about the emotional entanglement between you.
James is really obsessed. Sister.
You did the right thing. You should break up with this timing scumbag as soon as possible. Only by breaking up can you meet someone better. Sister Sophia, don't be sad. Only by missing out on the bad can you meet someone more excellent. Then she forwarded some heartwarming inspirational articles to me. I felt a little torn between laughter and tears. But at the same time, I was also deeply touched. I wasn't very familiar with Daphne. Just because of James, we had only had a few interactions before. I knew that she was a straightforward and sincere girl. Thank you, I'm not sad. There are more important things than being in love now. I replied. Oh, that's good, do you know? Isabella reported James in return, saying that James had abused his power for personal gain, used company resources to take on private jobs outside, and even provided information to a rival company to seek benefits. After the company verified it, they confirmed that it was true. They fired James and are going to sue him. What a pity. Originally, with his ability, he would have become the youngest department head in the company in the future. I was a bit surprised by this. When we were together, James had shown signs of this. After I discovered it, I tried my best to dissuade him and told him about the pros and cons. Later, he promised me that he wouldn't do it again. I never expected that he had never given up. And Isabella had found out about it. No, maybe Isabella didn't find out. It was James who took the initiative to mention it. I know James' personality too well. He was overly confident to the point of being arrogant. He thought that because of his relationship with Isabella, she wouldn't tell anyone. But the results slapped him in the face. I didn't have any particular thoughts about everything that had happened between them recently. When Julian found out, he wolfed down 3 big bowls of rice that night. I didn't expect to meet James again. It was on the morning of the day I left Hai Chong. I had already completed all the handover of my work here. I returned the rented house. I asked the landlord to notify James to come and pick up his things after I left. The things I sold on Gionu were basically dealt with. Some large items had already been sent back home, and the rest were almost packed up. As early as 3 days ago, Julian had finished his work here. In order to wait for me, he specifically applied to the company to stay a few more days. Then, during the day, he would stay in the room and play games, and in the evening, he would wait for me to come back and ask me to cook his favorite dishes for him. I wanted to curse, but I held it back because of my good personal cultivation. At 9 o'clock in the morning on the day, I left Hai Chong, Julian, and I put our luggage in his car. When I turned around, I saw James. James had lost a lot of weight, and his hair had grown a lot longer. It looked messy without being combed, and the stubble on his chin was clearly visible. He looked a bit nervous. When he saw me looking at him, James forced a smile that was uglier than a cry. Sophia, it will only take you a few minutes. I want to say a few words to you. I stared at James for a long time and then sighed. Okay. I tipped James to a corner not far from the car. What do you want to say? Sophia, are you going on a business trip? How long will you be away? No, the company is sending me on an assignment, but I'm going to stay in my hometown and not come back. When did you decide this? Was it after I forgot your birthday?
Yes.
Look at what stupid things I've done. I'm such a jerk. James said, self-deprecating lie. Sophia, what you said before, that I wanted to marry you just because you were suitable and not because I loved you, was wrong. Since we broke up, I've always been thinking about the time we spent together. The scenes of us having meals, traveling, and watching movies together keep replaying in my mind. I can't let go of that past. I once loved Isabella. When she first came back to the country, I did waver. But I never thought of breaking up with you and being with her. I never felt jealous when she had several boyfriends abroad. But when I saw their men by your side, I really went crazy. Just the thought of you being with someone else made me so jealous that I couldn't sleep. I helped Isabella more as a way to show off to her. I wanted to tell her, look, the man you disdained backed, and is doing so well now, with a good job and a girlfriend who loves him. I wanted to prove to her how short-sighted she was back then.
I'm sorry.
My vanity has hurt me, and also hurt you.
I'm sorry.
After saying this, James took out a document bag from his bag. Sophia, during this month, I thought about what you said to me over and over again. You said that where the money is, the heart is. This is all my assets, my car, my bank card, and the property ownership certificate of the house in my hometown. I'm willing to give them all to you. I just want to give you everything I have. He paused for a moment, then continued with a choked voice. The house we once went to see together. You said you really liked it. I still don't have the ability to buy it now. I will work hard to save money and make money. After I buy that house, can you give me a chance to pursue you again?
I looked at James.
At this moment, he no longer had his former high spirits. In his eyes looking at me, there was uneasiness and expectation. I was silent for a while and then said softly, James, you don't need to work so hard. Really, there's no need for this. I once envisioned our future. I told you about the style, lighting, and room layout of the house I liked. That house was my dream house that I had always longed for.
I thought it was also our common dream.
But when Isabella wanted to rent a house, you told her all the ideas about the house that I had shared with you, and you even helped her rent a similar house in the same neighborhood. Since then, I've developed a psychological aversion. I gave up on that dream. As soon as I started speaking, James' face began to turn pale. By the time I finished speaking, he had lost all color. I smiled, feeling a sense of relief for the past. James, we really can't go back to the way we were. Even after getting in the car, I was still immersed in my emotions, and Julian elbowed me, pulling me back to reality. Julian, are you crazy? I said, rubbing my sore arm. You're finally back to normal. I'm telling you, scumbags aren't worth your sympathy. Can you have better taste in men in the future? Don't waste your time on scumbags. Since when do you get to boss me around, you? Suddenly, Julianne handed me a box. I took it in confusion and opened it. It was a gold bracelet. Seeing my surprise, Julian smiled and explained, "This is a reward for you taking care of me during this time. You saved me the cost of a hotel by letting me stay at your place. I bought this small bracelet as a reward for you."
Try it on.
I looked at Julian in disbelief. And then I hugged him excitedly. "Thank you, bro." Julian grinned at me and ruffled my hair with his right hand. "You're such a fool." Yes, Julian is not only my childhood sweetheart, but also my cousin, my aunt's child. If James had ever gone home with me to meet my parents, he would have discovered the truth. But he never did. Both my parents and Julian's parents are civil servants. Our two families bought houses in the same neighborhood and the same unit, and our doors face each other. We were in the same class from primary school to junior high school, and then to senior high school. We are both only children, and our relationship is very close, no less than that of siblings and other families. Looking at my delighted expression, Julian couldn't help but sigh. "When I saw you during the spring festival, you were frowning and sitting on the sofa, staring blankly at your phone. My aunt and uncle asked you about your boyfriend, but you kept beating around the bush and couldn't get to the point. That's when I realized something was wrong. It's great that you've come to your senses now."
Ard.
The more I think about it, the angrier I get. Why didn't I punch him a few more times that day? I laughed and said, "Bro, with your weak appearance, James was on the school basketball team before. You can't beat him. If I hadn't stopped you, you would have been the one getting hurt." Julian pouted, not quite convinced, and then changed the subject. "I just received a message. Auntie has already prepared the ingredients at home and is waiting for you to come back and welcome you home." "Great," I smiled sincerely. Outside the car window, the sun was shining just right, neither too strong nor too weak. A new journey was already on its way.